I'm going to show you how I scan film here from start to finish, the complete process. Now the first thing we need to do is clean our negative carrier. The scanner that I have is the Nikon 8000ED, which is a medium format and 35mm scanner. It came with several negative carriers for 35mm film and 35mm slides and 120 film. And those carriers that come with it don't use glass to hold the film flat. And the problem is the design of them was so poor, they were made out of very flimsy plastic, that it was almost impossible for the film to stay flat in them. And if your film is not flat when it's being scanned, it won't be sharp. You'll have sharp areas and unsharp areas where the film has curved, in and out of the zone of focus that the scanner's lens has. And so what I've ended up doing is I had to buy the glass carrier for that scanner, which is the FH869GR. The glass carrier, I think, for the Nikon 8000 and for the 9000 scanner is basically a necessity to get high quality scans out of it. Now the problem with using the glass carrier is that it has all that glass that has to be kept clean. You have the top piece of glass and the bottom piece of glass, and the top and bottom of each piece of glass, all four surfaces, has to be perfectly clean, because if there's any dust or fingerprints or other smudges on the glass, they'll show up in your scans. So the first thing we need to do is take out the mask. This negative carrier uses these plastic masks for each film size that you want to do in it. We'll take that out while we're doing the cleaning. And what I'm using to clean them with is cotton balls and isopropyl alcohol. And cotton balls work great for this because they won't scratch the glass as long as you've got good quality ones that don't have seeds or other bits of dirt in them like some of the cheaper ones have. And they're nice and inexpensive too, so put a little drop of alcohol on a cotton swab or cotton ball, and then we can use that to clean the scanner glass. Alright, now we're going to start with the top piece of glass, and we'll take our cotton swab with the alcohol on it, and I'm going to rub it in circular motions over the entire surface of the glass. Make sure the whole thing is covered with it, because you want to use this to get any fingerprints or any dust that's kind of embedded itself in there off. And before I do that too, I'll blow the dust off with canned air. That way there's no dust to serve as an abrasive before we put the liquid and cotton ball on. You want to get it as clean as possible that way first. After we've gotten it wet with the alcohol, we'll grab another cotton ball here and dry it off then. Same way, circular motions over the glass. I have to kind of do it in a linear fashion near the edges or else it won't get totally clean. You don't want to leave any residue on from the alcohol, because if you do, it'll show up in your scans. It looks like I'm pressing pretty hard on this, and I'm really not. You don't want to push too hard on the glass because you might scratch it. Now, once you've got it all clean and dry, I go ahead and take another cotton ball, because sometimes a little bit of residue will still show up on there if you don't wipe it a second time. I'll do the same thing as I did with the first one. This doesn't take as much time. It's really just getting any minute amount that might be left off of it. Alright, now that we got that clean, we'll use the canned air to dust it off. And we'll repeat the process for the two inside surfaces after we open it up, and then also on the bottom. I'll go ahead and do those and not make you sit through watching all that, but it's the same process used for the top glass. Now the canned air is important. It's important the canned air you use too. Most of the canned air that's sold in the stores now is really not suitable for this work. Several years ago they started putting in the canned air a chemical they call a bitterant, which is something that makes the vapors from the canned air smell bad and taste bad. The purpose being to discourage people who use this stuff to get high off of. There's drug addicts that will inhale the propellant that comes out of these things in order to get high. And it's extremely bad for their health. It's actually quite a bit worse than a lot of street drugs, but people do this anyway because it's something that's easy to get. You can buy it in stores. The problem with that chemical that they put in there, it may deter drug addicts, but it is not good for what we're doing, because that bitterant actually leaves a residue on the glass when you spray the glass on the negative carrier, and also on camera lenses or anything else you clean with it. You can actually get this stuff made without the bitumen in it from industrial supply companies, because this kind of stuff is used in industry to clean things that are being manufactured, and it's used in repair centers, where they repair cameras and such too. The stuff that I'm using here is called Tech Spray 1671-10S. That's the model number of it, and I get it from a company called Chemco. Their website's gochemco.com, GOKIMCO.com. And I'll put the website address and the model number in the description for the video. It's not terribly expensive. It's about the same as canned air you buy in the stores, $6 or $7 a can. And this stuff leaves no residue at all on the scanner glass. I usually order 4 or 5 cans of it at a time, which will last me about 6 months or so. So a couple times a year I'll place an order for it. So it's important you get the right kind of canned air, because almost all the stuff that's sold in places like Walmart or Office Depot or Staples or whatever, all of them have that bitter agent in there to discourage the drug addicts. Alright, now I've got all 4 surfaces cleaned, and the next thing I'm going to do is I want to dust off with the canned air the 2 inside surfaces. So I'll open up the negative carrier and kind of quickly blow the dust off the top and bottom both, and then I'll quickly close it after I do that to keep any dust from falling inside. Now the next thing I need to do is find the correct scanner mask for the film size we're going to do. The negatives I'm going to scan today is a 35mm panoramic negative. A few days ago I was given a wonderful gift. A friend sent me a Horizon 202 panoramic camera. Now, this is a Russian-made swing lens panoramic, and it gives an image on 35mm film that's the same height as 35mm pictures, 24mm, but the negative is about 58mm wide, so it's about 1.5 times the width of a regular 35mm, so it's a very long, skinny negative. And we do happen to have, in our collection of scanner masks that came with the negative carrier, there is a panoramic 35mm mask, and that is what we're going to use. Now the scanner mask, I've never used this one before because this is the first time I've ever scanned this size film, so I'm going to dust it off, make sure there's no dust on the mask, and then I need to put it inside the carrier, and I'll quickly open the carrier up, put the mask in, close it up, keep dust out. Now the next thing I'm going to do is open the carrier back up, and I'm going to hold the mask in place with one finger and kind of blow the dust out just to... The point of that was to make sure there's no dust lurking anywhere when I put that in that might have gotten on the glass. Now, the next thing I need to do is select a negative. I'll go ahead and turn on our light table here so we can select a negative. Now, I'm going to look at the negatives here, and you probably can't see there on the video camera, but the one I'm going to select is this one right here. It's the one in the middle on the bottom strip. Now this is the film that I'm going to scan, and the picture I'm going to choose is the one that's right here in the middle on the bottom strip. These other ones are a little underexposed. I think the shutter on this runs a little bit fast, because these should have been properly exposed and they're actually about to stop under, so it's a good thing I bracketed the exposures. This was my very first roll on this camera. So we're going to choose this one right here, and we're going to get it into the negative carrier where the mask is there. Now, of course, the negative, it's been in the plastic sleeve and it's probably clean, but I'm going to go ahead and blow the dust off of it anyway. Got a little bit of lint on my fingernail there from the cotton balls. Usually I try to blow the dust off this stuff away from the negative carrier itself because I don't want to blow dust back onto it. Now, after I get that dusted off, we'll open up the carrier here. I try not to open it all the way because I don't want to get any dust inside it. Now these are kind of tricky to get positioned in here because this negative carrier doesn't have any side rails to hold the negative in place. You just have to kind of do it by sight and With 35mm negatives, it can be kind of a pain to get them in there correctly. There we go. We can see here how the negative is positioned in the carrier. The negative looks a little bit too light because the video camera is overexposing a little bit, but the negative does look pretty good. I think it's going to make a good scan. So the next thing we're going to do now is just walk over to the scanner and push the negative carrier in, and then we'll look at the scanner software. Now there is one more thing we have to do before we put the negative carrier into the scanner, and that's we need to dust off the top and bottom. Now I've cleaned the top and the bottom of the glass with the cotton balls and the alcohol, but with all the work we've been doing here, cleaning the negatives and such, there's going to be some dust stirred up, and we need to make sure that the dust is blown off the top and bottom. So I'll take the canned air and 2 or 3 quick bursts, blow the dust off the top and bottom of the carrier, and it's ready to go in. Now this really involved cleaning process that I've just showed you. You don't have to do this for every individual negative you scan. I do this when I first start scanning, when I first start a scanning session, because if the negative carrier has been sitting around a while, it's going to be dirty. And then after that, I can usually scan. In between each negative, I use the canned air to dust off the carrier, of course. But actually cleaning the glass with the alcohol and the cotton balls, that's really not necessary. In between each scan, I can scan several negatives before it starts getting kind of gunky looking and needs that again. The top and bottom glass actually tends to not need clean so often, strangely enough, even since they're the ones that are most exposed to dust and dirt. The interior ones, the ones that actually hold the film flat, they tend to accumulate a lot of gunk and dirt from the film surface itself. Even if your film looks really clean, there's going to be residue of the photo flow and such like that was used in processing. And after scanning 4 or 5 negatives, typically I'll start seeing a little bit of gunk on the glass, and when you see that, it's time to clean the glass again. And so then I'll go through the routine that I just showed you with the cotton balls and the alcohol and all that. In between negatives, normally it's just necessary to blow the dust off with the canned air in between each one. And you can just keep like that until the glass actually needs really cleaned. When you start getting some gunk on the canned air, won't take off. Alright, you can see my workstation over here. I've got my computer and my scanner, canned air again. I'm going to go ahead and dust off the top and bottom of the scanner glass one more time, since I've been walking around through my house with it. After that, stick it into the scanner. And once the scanner gets done with its initialization process, we'll be ready to get started with the actual scan itself. Okay, the scanning software that I'm using is Vuescan, and I've already got the negative carrier stuck into the scanner. Let's go ahead and look at the settings we're going to use. I've got it set to scan to file. The source is LS-8000 because that's the kind of scanner I have. Media is set to black and white negative. Bits per pixel is 16-bit gray, because we're going to scan in grayscale. There's a lot of people who think that if you scan a black and white negative as a color image that you're going to somehow get more information or you're going to get a greater tonal range. It's absolutely false. It's very easy to test that and see that all you're getting is a file that's 3 times as large. Make gray from, you can choose which color the scanner scans in red, blue, and green because it's basically a color scanner, and so Vuescan is going to choose which channel to make the gray from. I've really found very little difference between them, so I just keep it at auto, at least with this scanner. Batch scan is off because this negative carrier only does one negative at a time. The 35mm carrier that came with the scanner lets you do multiple negatives at the same time, and so you can do batch scanning with that, but that's something we can't do with what we're using now. Frame number and all that doesn't need to be changed for this negative carrier. Preview resolution, I keep it auto. It just basically scans the preview at enough resolution to fill up your space here. Now scan resolution, I keep at 4000 dpi. That's the resolution of the scanner. It's its maximum resolution. I never scan at anything lower than that because when I first got this scanner many years ago, I've had this about 12 years now, I would scan things at lower resolution that I thought I was only going to print at a smaller print size. And what ended up happening was that eventually someone would come along and say, hey, I'd like to buy a big print of that. Can you make me one? Yeah, and I got to dig out the negative and rescan the thing because I didn't scan it at high enough resolution. If you scan at maximum resolution, you can make small prints without losing quality from them, but you cannot. If you scan at a low resolution, you cannot make a large print from that. You need to rescan. It's a waste of time. You might as well just do it right to begin with. Now rotation, we don't worry about that until we do the preview scan. Autofocus I leave on always. Auto scan none. Autosave scan. Autosave scan means when it finishes the final scan, it automatically saves the file. Let's go ahead and hit the preview button and wait for it to do the preview. And then from there we can set the final settings that we need to use. This is typically pretty fast. It takes a minute or two to do the preview. The final scan's a lot slower because it's going to scan at 4000 dpi. The preview just does a real low resolution scan, enough to fill the screen for you to get an idea of what you're gonna get in your final image, so that you can do your cropping and everything. You can see the image is starting to appear here. Now the image looks way too light, and the preview scans always look like that during the scanning process. When it finishes doing the preview scan, though, it's going to change the appearance of it, and it's going to look more normal on the screen. Getting pretty close, we're up to 85%. Okay, now what we need to do is set the cropping, and you can see the dotted line here. This is what would be scanned if we did the final scan right now. Of course, we don't want to do that because we need to set this to the actual image boundaries. Okay. Now, this little thing up here that you see that looks like a kind of a bouncing circle, it's expanding and contracting, this is the focus point. You can actually choose where on the image you want the scanner to focus, because this is an autofocus scanner, so it actually focuses on the detail in the image, and you can choose any point for it to focus on. Usually I try to pick something that's got a lot of fine detail, and this bush back here has quite a lot. I try to choose something near the middle of the picture too. If for some reason the film would not be 100% flat, if you were to choose something near the sides, it might make everything else look unsharp. This glass carrier tends to eliminate most of those problems, though it keeps the film pretty flat. So we've set our cropping, we've set our focus point. Let's go and look at the other settings here. Crop, I pretty much The filter and crop settings I leave alone. For filter, I leave infrared clean turned off. That doesn't work on black and white film. That's only for color. The grain reduction and restoring fading and stuff, I leave all that alone. Color, I leave the color balance set to manual. And I leave these all set at the defaults, except that I change the black point and white point to 0. The defaults have the white point and black point pulled in a little bit, and I find that that tends, with many of my negatives, to clip the highlights and shadows. So I set those to 0, leave everything else alone. You can change these curve points to adjust contrast, but in Vuescan this is such a cumbersome way of doing it that I find it's better just to leave it alone and do the work in Photoshop. For the film, I tend to leave at Kodak T-Max, and then for most things I leave it at either 100 or 400. There really doesn't seem to be much difference in Vuescan. Usually scanning at the T-Max 400 settings gives you a little bit lighter scan, and scanning at the T-Max 100 settings gives a little bit darker scan. And I'm going to use that for this one because I don't want these highlights to get blown in the whites here. Now, output color space needs to be set to grayscale. Vuescan is kind of confusing because it'll ask you in the input tab about whether you want color or grayscale, but then it asks you again in the color tab, and it will also ask you in the output tab. And it'll say, we're going to use a TIFF file, and it'll say TIFF file type 16-bit gray. So you have to set 16-bit gray 3 times in here. The interface on Vuescan really sucks, but the scanner software itself works brilliantly. It gives the highest quality scans of any software I've tried with the scanner. It's better than Nikon Scan. It's also a lot more stable because Nikon Scan crashes all the time on modern Macs. So it's worth putting up with Vuescan's idiosyncrasies in order to get the quality of scans it gives. Once we've got all this stuff set, then we can go ahead and hit the scan button. And this is going to do the final 4000 dpi high-end or high-resolution scan. Now this process is going to take a while. This will probably take, it'll take a few minutes to do this. It's going to be a lot slower than the preview scan was. And just like the preview scan, you'll be able to watch it happen on the screen. And you can see how slow this is going. We're only up at the 5% point, so we'll go ahead and skip ahead to the point where it's almost finished and not make you wait through all this. Okay, we're up to the 96% point, so we'll go ahead and come back to this and watch the rest of the scanning. Should be done in a few seconds. It takes a few seconds to process the scan to make the final finished TIFF file for us to use. Okay, it's all done. So this is the only negative I'm going to scan right now, so we'll go ahead and close out Vuescan. My picture is going to be saved in a folder called Scans, which is somewhere on this very busy desktop. Here we go. And there we can find it right there. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Photoshop. Alright, now here we got our file, and as you can see on my website where I've got the text tutorial on how to do scanning, the scans that come right out of the scanner, they always look terrible. They're very flat, they're very gray, very lifeless, and you can see that on this one here. What we're going to have to do is we need to do some curves adjustments to bring the contrast back up where it needs to be. And I'm going to do that using adjustment layers. And I have a tutorial, a video tutorial on how to do adjustment layers and how to also work with the curves. And it usually takes several curves layers to get exactly what I want. This one's going to be a tough one anyway because I think this image was just slightly underexposed. The trick is I'm trying to get enough contrast in the midtones without losing the highlights and shadows. You can see our snowman and our sand over here. We're in danger of that happening. I think to get exactly what I want out of this, I'm going to have to do some dodging and burning to keep these light areas from going too light and to bring a little more contrast into these darker areas, because this film was, this is Ilford Delta 3200. It's kind of a tricky film anyway, and it was, I think, still a little bit underexposed. I'm going to have to do another test of this camera and see if that's an issue with other films, but I believe that the shutter in it's running a little bit fast. So I think that's as good as we can get with this one to start with. I'm going to have to do a little bit of dodging and burning with adjustment layers and layer masks, and I have video tutorials and text tutorials on CrawfordPhotoschool.com explaining in more detail how that works. So we'll go ahead and end this now, but that shows the process that I go through to scan a negative from start to finish. The cleaning of the negative carrier, the selecting the negative, doing the preview scan, setting the cropping, setting the settings of Vuescan, and then doing the final scan and doing the initial adjustments in Photoshop. And the point of the initial adjustments I've just done in Photoshop is to get you want to get the overall image looking pretty close to what you want, and then from there you can go on and fine-tune it by doing things like using adjustment layers with layer masks to adjust certain areas of the picture, like, for example, darkening down Santa Claus here so he's not blown out, in order to get the picture to its final finished form. And this can be time consuming on some images. A difficult one like this that was poorly exposed to begin with, this might take me, I might spend an hour or more on this one doing different types of dodging and burning and other adjustments. An image that was from a well exposed negative shot under good light might take very little work. It might be something I can do very quickly with little or no adjustments to. It just depends on the individual picture. But every picture does need these additional adjustments in Photoshop after the scan to take that flat gray looking scan and get to something that has a normal full tonal range and normal mid-tone contrast.